So, very good. As we come together tonight, and as we begin, I want to welcome Anitra Brown with the New Orleans Tribune, who is graciously consented today to be our guest moderator, who always does a wonderful, wonderful job. Anitra, do you want to just tell us, for those who don't know you, a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. I am the managing editor of the New Orleans Tribune. 20 plus years experience as a journalist and journalism educator. Consider myself very much a social justice journalist, and excited about being here today. So let's get in.
All right, very good. I'm going to turn it over to you, Anitra. You can have the panelists introduce themselves and just do what you do. All right.
All right. So that's what I'm going to kind of start off doing is having each panelist introduce themselves, but asking a very specific question to each one to kind of get us started. And I'll start with Ernest Johnson, the director of Ubuntu Village NOLA. In your work, Mr. Johnson, could you talk to us a little bit about the impact that you see the results of this special crime session having on youth in our community, families?
Yes, thank you for that question. My name is Ernest Johnson. As she indicated, I'm the director of Ubuntu Village. We have been working with young people who are impacted by the criminal justice system and their families for over the last 10 years. And what we're seeing is that, I want to say, not wasted, but a lot of energy and a lot of time over the years that we put in work to do some reform and reduce the number of kids that are in the system and support their families. It's almost like, we didn't do anything. It's like, we've done all this time to reform the system and change the way we treat children, and yet we come back and see this happening. And what is alarming to us is that we want to we're trying to change our phrase from reform, right, to transformation of human beings, because what we find is historically, we act in a system that has never protected us to protect our children. And, when you do that, I think a lot of times we have illusions that things are going to change, but historically we have seen over and over and over, we do all this reform, we get a new administration, and then they turn back sort of the hands of times on us. You're muted.
Mr. Peter Robbins Brown, if you could introduce yourself and in doing so also answer this question. There are a number of pieces of legislation that either right now they're either on the governor's desk or headed for executive approval. And of course, this was all done under the guise of making us safer. But I think that there is a general understanding that a lot of these laws don't make us any safer. They don't make us any better. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the potential that they do have, how they're going to affect our communities at large, and how they will what you believe the result of some of these pieces of legislation could be for our communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to know, so Peter Robbins Brown, I'm the executive director of an organization called Louisiana Progress. We work on criminal justice issues, environmental issues, and labor-related issues, work very closely with the unions in the state. On the criminal justice side, we really focus on what we call decriminalizing poverty. What are the ways that poor folks get swept into the system and then trapped there largely because they have a lack of resources. I think I want to start by echoing what Mr. Johnson said. We've been down this path of reform for 8 to 10 years now, and not only have in 8 to 10 days did they roll that back, they actually kind of went back farther. What I do think is important to understand, because I certainly, and I think, Mr. Johnson, expressed this as well, and I think a lot of us probably feel this way, is it feels dispiriting, right? You spend a long time trying to make some progress, a little bit of progress, and our opposition can kind of wipe that out quickly. But I think when you look at the long arc of history, this is how it goes, right? In a lot of ways, unfortunately, it's never just a straight line to justice. But as Dr. King talked about, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. I do believe in that, and I think that as dispiriting as it can feel at a time like this, these battles, even the ones where we lose the battle, or where some wins get rolled back, this is the messy process of getting to a better place. And so that's at least what I've been saying to myself for the past few days after what's been a very rough few weeks. I think what we see, and this is what I guess was just frankly so stupid to me about this whole thing. I mean, there's so many different words I could use to describe the process of what we saw the past few weeks. Cruel, ignorant, etc., but also stupid, because we've seen that this doesn't work. It's not like we're trying this for the first time. It's not like, oh, crime is out of control, which it isn't. Although I do understand that it's certainly public safety is a concern. I don't ever want to dismiss that as a serious concern. But it's certainly not as bad as the folks who push this stuff would make you think it is. And if they were like, okay, we haven't tried this approach before. We don't know what's going to happen. We think it might work, and we need to give it a shot. Okay. Maybe I could even deal with the cruelty of it if it was something that could work. But we know for sure that it won't, because it never has. We've done it over and over and over and over again. Louisiana consistently for the past multiple hundreds of years has had the highest incarceration rates and the highest crime rates. If locking people up made us safer, we'd be the safest place in America. It's the opposite. So what we're going to see is that this is going to further trap a segment of our population, and by that segment, namely Black and Brown communities, people at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, that's going to trap those folks in generational cycles, further trap them. I don't want to say that because it's not new, right? Further trap those communities in generational cycles of poverty and criminalization. And that is what makes us less safe. I'll end on this just to kind of think about what, and in New Orleans, we see this all the time. If you live in New Orleans or come through New Orleans, you see it all the time. You go from one neighborhood to the next. You go from one safe neighborhood to a relatively less safe neighborhood. And the difference is night and day, right? What does a safe neighborhood look like? What does an unsafe or a less safe neighborhood look like? The safe neighborhood, street lights work. There's trees. There's schools. There's libraries. The public infrastructure, there's parks, right? You go to a less safe neighborhood, you see much less of those things, right? If we really want to sustainably deal with public safety, which we should want to, we all want to live in safe communities. Everybody, I think, wants to live in a community where they can take their kids out, walk them to school, whatever they want to do without fear. We need to work to make all communities look safe. And the real shame of all this is we're going to end up spending so much money on these bills that just got passed. That is money that could have gone to fixing all of those things that contribute to sustainably safe neighborhoods. And now not only did they miss the opportunity to do that, but this is going to cost money. And that means that down the line, in the very near future, we're going to have less money as a state to do anything else, let alone make our neighborhoods, our communities, our people sustainably safer. And I think that's really that's the crime of all this, is that the stupidity, the cruelty, the ignorance, and the missed opportunity.
Thank you. Kelsey Jenkins with the Louisiana Budget Project. If you could please introduce yourself and kind of give us an overview of what from the perspective of your organization, what kind of numbers have you guys concluded that the bills that result, the new laws that result from this special session, what it's going to cost us?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Jenkins. I'm a criminal justice policy analyst with the Louisiana Budget Project. So I think the first thing that needs to be said is that the decrease of our prison population over the last 6 to 7 years has saved the state $153 million, a little bit more than that actually. And that all of that money has been reinvested into things that we know reduce and prevent crime. So any increase in our prison population is going to negate those savings, negate those investments, and kind of lose that train of progress that we had going for us. We're going to slide backwards. More specifically, it's really difficult to get a number for the total impact of all of these bills. They're all super harmful, but in general, what they do is they're going to add numbers of people to the prison population, and those numbers are going to be there for longer. The average daily cost of incarcerating someone in Louisiana is about $60 and some change. So a year of incarceration for a single person is about $24,500. I did a couple of different analyses for some specific bills, and just for the crime jacking bill that increases those penalties, it's going to it's going to increase every person's incarceration for crime jacking by at least $50,000. So if you have 20 people convicted of crime jacking, that right there.
Hello? Carjacking?
Carjacking? Yes. So as I'm sure y'all are all aware, the carjacking bill, it increases the minimum penalty from 3 years to 5 years. So we're looking at least 2 extra years of incarceration. So that's $50,000 off the bat for any person from now on who's convicted of carjacking. And because they're not going to get out on good time, or they're not going to get out on parole, that is a definite $50,000 that we're spending on their incarceration. How many schools do we know of that could benefit from $50,000? So every dollar that we spend on incarcerating somebody is a dollar that's taken away from schools, parks, hospitals, all the things that we know contribute to public safety. For the good time and parole elimination bills, those are going to cost us 3 to 4 times as much as we're spending now. Good time, and so with the HB 10, what's going to happen is that people are going to be serving at least 3 times their average sentence that they were before. And again, each year of incarceration for a single person is about $24,500. When you have 28,000 and almost 100 inmates, and you're adding to that, that's millions of dollars every single year. And I think that let me see, I have a specific number for you here. So I'm sorry, I don't have a specific number for the good time and the parole bills. For House Bill 11, which increases the maximum period of probation from 3 years to 5, it costs about $6 a year to supervise somebody on probation. So if only the people who are currently on probation were extended by 2 years, that's 25,300 people on probation, it would cost the state an extra $111 million just to supervise the people that are currently on probation for an extra 2 years. The bigger picture, though, is that we're about to lose a very important tax that's going to, with the combination of the increased spending on incarceration, it's going to bankrupt us. So the harm, the cost of all of these bills is going to be multiplied exponentially because we don't have the money to begin with, and now we're wasting it on things that do not help us. They don't, help victims become whole. They don't prevent crime in the first place. So the cost is really indeterminable for a host of reasons. I have a question in the chat that says, so is the goal to incarcerate and/or impoverish the state? I don't know my audience very well, but I will say that I think the goal is to incarcerate the poorest people in the state who just so happen to also be people of color. And I wholeheartedly believe that is the goal, to get them out of the voting population and just wreak havoc on the state. So I apologize if that's not the forum to say that in.
No, and I will. I think that that is exactly right, and I will add, it's the goal is to certainly detrimentally harm the most marginalized communities in the state, and then the added bonus is enriching prisons and private prison operators, because all of this money that we'll be spending will be going to those who operate prisons, the private prisons in our state, as well as the ones that the state runs. So I have a question for Peter. We talked a little bit about it, the impact that these bills, these laws will have on community. Could you talk a little bit more about how they are, their potential for impacting the prison population itself, and the way that you see some of these regressive policies hurting or reversing trends in the prison population? We like to think that at least part of what happens when someone is incarcerated is rehabilitation. But if I'm going to now not have an opportunity for parole, stay in prison longer, not get good time credit for doing, good behavior or taking classes or bettering myself, then what happens to those individuals who are incarcerated? How do you see these policies affecting our prison population? Peter?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The first thing is that in terms of just total numbers, we're for sure going to see the prison population go up. I think Kelsey spoke to that really well. Is we've seen the total population come down rather significantly, while also seeing overall reductions in crime since these reforms were begun about a decade ago. We're going to see the prison population increase. In terms of I think the question and where you're getting to again speaks to just the blatant stupidity of this whole exercise. You have so I mean, the ways that it's going to completely disrupt the system. Right now, more than 90% of people who are incarcerated have pled out. Right, they've made a plea deal before going to trial or in the midst of trial, because of the idea that they can shorten their sentence or they can earn parole. When you take that away from them on the front end, it's going to end up clogging up our court system. And our court system is already significantly overburdened. You add to that Senate Bill 8, which moves public defender oversight and regulation essentially into the governor's control. So the same governor who's pushing an agenda of locking more people up will also be largely controlling indigent defense in our state. That is going to create huge constitutional problems where indigent defenders are not going to be able to get representation. They're also not going to want to plea because they're going to know that there's no point in pleading because they're going to have to, they're never going to be able to get out especially if it's a serious matter. And so you're going to have pretrial detention is going to explode. Caseloads are going to be unmanageable. There won't be enough lawyers to both prosecute and defend those cases. Then once somebody does end up incarcerated, and like we said, more people will be, when there's no hope of getting out or of earning ways to reduce your sentence, that will breed nihilism inside these facilities. That's why for the past many years, the Department of Corrections has largely opposed these because they know that they also have a staffing problem. They are severely understaffed when it comes to prison guards. They already have a very difficult time maintaining order in a lot of facilities, especially those more rural areas where it's harder to find guards. They pay very low for that position, so nobody really wants that job. And so now you're going to have a much less manageable incarcerated population. And that's just, I mean, I don't care how good-hearted you are. and you might have made one mistake, but when you end up locked up and you don't have any hope of getting out, you're going to lose hope. You're going to become a nihil. Like it's, oh, well, there's no reason for me to do any of this or care, or, care about any of the people I'm locked up with, care about the guards. So you created, I think what's, and I don't want to go on, like, I feel very confident in making predictions about increasing number of incarcerated people and increasing costs, right? I feel like that's basically a guarantee. I don't know that predicting system breakdown is a guarantee because it's just hard to predict that kind of thing. I think that it is very foreseeable that we could see system breakdown at all of these levels, pre-trial, trial, and in jails and prisons afterwards. And despite the many, many attempts by both advocates and legislators who are opposed to some of this to point this out, those concerns were brushed aside by the same people who were saying they were doing this to fix the system, to make people more safe. And so I think the inability to see the bigger picture was, again, one of the true crimes that was perpetrated during this session, is that there's just so much unaccounted for, and they really could have set us up for like deep, horrific system breakdown.
Mr. Johnson, could you speak a little more specifically to some of these bills that impact juveniles directly, the publishing of juvenile records, as well as the lowering of the age in which a juvenile offender can now find him or herself being tried in adult court and then sent to the adult correction system if convicted? What do you see as the potential impacts of these of these laws for juvenile offenders as this moves forward?
Yeah, so when you talk about HB1, which is a transparency bill that speaks to youth records being published for everyone to see, this came out of a bill. It was introduced last year, but it failed. But it had so happened to come back up here, and it specifically targeted at a number of areas. When you talk about Shreveport, Orleans Parish, and a number of specific parishes that predominantly are African American or brown people. So it really doesn't have a significant impact, because on a lot of cases of youth, when in particular in violent offenses, their records are being published and people are aware of them. So and putting, I think it's more of a fear mongering and allowing attack on those particular individuals by releasing their records, right? We're in the midst of a lot of chaos in our society, and I don't think that allowing their records to be published, it doesn't add anything to it. It may become conflicting at some time because you're publishing their names, and it may become a threat, or it's almost like it's intended to sort of create this civil war, right? You're putting that information out about these particular individuals. And when you talk about SB3, right, and lowering the age, right, back to 17, it goes back to what both Kelsey and Peter were talking about, the significant cost of arresting young people for minor offenses, right? We already have laws in place that if it's a violent offense as low as the age of 14, that you can transfer a kid. The district attorney has the authority to transfer young people for those cases. So by you lowering the age and bringing it back to 17, what we're going to do is clog up our system again with young people with minor offenses that shouldn't be in jail in the first place. And I don't know if you're aware that the sheriff office right here in Orleans Parish is trying to get prepared for it because of what the needs are of young people. When you put them in Orleans Parish prison per se, right? They cannot be detained because of pre-laws, that will not allow them to interact with adults. So when they're not acting with adults, you have to isolate them on specific tiers. You have to give special issues for them. So it's going to, again, cost us more money. I will say again, inside of this reform, I think it's a bigger threat than the reality of what we're seeing. And I think the underlying issues of this is around like putting money in sheriff's pockets in rural areas, right? Giving more money to police, right? And widening this wealth gap between, people who are poor and people who are rich on the backs of a crime session, or especially, and making people believe that these kids are out of hand. It was very disturbing in the opening of this special session, the way I feel like the victims were utilized, right? They put a lot of stuff on their back. And I don't think that gets us to where we want to go as a society. If we're trying to heal and make our society more safer, then we shouldn't be using them as trophies, right? As to say, get tougher on crime because of one specific incident that happened with them. And that's where we at today. We're in a society that, we just pushing things forward without being very thoughtful of it. And it's very disturbing that we may be coming back in another 4 years and undoing a lot of this because of the cost of
it. You bring up an interesting point, the fear mongering. So when I looked at these bills, I saw at least one or two instances of things that were just not necessary. For instance, the carjacking enhancements, right? So, and I guess anyone can speak to this, Mr. Brown, Ms. Jenkins, or Ms. Johnson. But I looked at that one specifically and found it to be just as really, we know that, carjacking is a serious crime. We've had issues with it here in New Orleans, and it was a really good way to get people worked up. But it's unnecessary, because if you already commit a battery or a murder during the commission of a carjacking, then we already have laws in place where you could be tried and convicted for the additional crime that was committed during the commission of the carjacking. And I found that to be, just as you said, a fear-mongering tactic. When we look at these laws, and anyone can answer, are there other examples of that in this session, of things that were just done? You can look at them and see that they were done to create a air of fear where there really isn't, to try and create these concerns where they didn't exist. Permitless carry, perhaps, I don't know, but if anyone could just kind of come in and chime in. Are there other areas of the bills that are in this session that were just superfluous, just overkill, unnecessary, and designed to make the people of this state see issues where none really existed?
Yeah, so I definitely think the permitless carry bills are an example of that fear mongering, specifically with the legislators' testimony and argument over them. I saw a tweet where Mike Johnson was arguing that, he doesn't feel bad for criminals. And if a criminal happens to run up on him, Mike Johnson will be carrying a pistol and will use it. And I think that promotes the mistaken belief that everyone everywhere is under constant threat of being mugged or robbed or encountered by a violent criminal. And what we know is that crime is concentrated in very specific areas. So most people in most places in Louisiana are at little to no risk of that happening. But through his testimony and the advocacy that took place in support of this bill, it's creating this feeling that we're just under constant threat. And I believe that the effect of that is going to be people who take advantage of this bill and begin to carry on their person. We're going to have more instances of people being shot in purported self-defense because people are so trigger happy knowing that they now have that right. And the attached civil immunity is only going to make that worse.
Yeah, I think Kelsey hit the nail on the head there. I mean, especially when you put those two together, the permitless carry and the civil immunity, because most people aren't going to read the details of any of those bills. They're just going to hear permitless immunity from civil action, Now, there's some details that, you're not immune from all civil action, but that's what people are going to hear. And if you were already thinking about getting a gun or carrying a gun or inclined to do it, that's going to be like a free pass. And it's an invitation to turn our state, which is already riddled with gun violence. Like, I think one thing that we have to admit, especially people sometimes in the criminal justice reform community, for lack of a better term, I think Ernest is right about trying to change some of the terminology. But we sometimes don't acknowledge that crime is a problem, right? Like public safety, that people, this is something that is very real to people. And when we don't acknowledge it, I think we can lose people who would otherwise be interested in hearing our solutions. So I think it's always important to acknowledge that crime is a problem and that we do need to do things about public safety. Giving people free reign to turn their neighborhood, their city, their parish, their state into the Wild West is not how we make ourselves safer. That's ridiculous. It's sort of like if you have cancer, the way to cure it is to give you more cancer. It's insane. It's absolutely insane to think that's a solution. Just to answer one other, Anitra, I think you did a very good job explaining why the carjacking bill was ridiculous. One other one, and this is just something that they hit on, and I feel like this is more about taking advantage of political talking points. The so-called like rainbow fentanyl bill. Like there's no such thing as rainbow fentanyl. Like it's just not a thing. Drug dealers are not selling fentanyl that looks like Mickey Mouse. Like nobody's giving it away in Halloween candy. It's just, but again, it just shows that like a lot of these people are driven by fear. The legislators too, and then they're responding to their constituents who are driven by fear, and they're driven. And then when you're living in a fear-based mindset, you'll kind of believe anything, right? Or you'll take anything and run with it, even if it's not based in reality. And maybe more than any other issue, when we're talking about public safety, we need to be basing our thoughts and our ideas in reality, in data, in what's actually going on, and not in fear mongering. Sadly, of all the issues we look at, it's probably the one that is where policy is the least based in data, and it's more based on emotion than any other policy area. And so it's a horrible disconnect where the thing where we should most be relying on data, evidence, facts, we actually often rely on it less than we do with anything else. And that's one of the things that's really scary about all this.
Mm-hmm. One other question I had before we kind of move forward, and I've heard a couple of you talk about this, recovering from this. How, when, if everything that is sitting on the governor's desk right now, waiting for executive approval, waiting for his signature passes, and worst case scenario, he's in office for another 4 years after his initial term, what does that trajectory toward recovery and change look like? Making some of these regressive policies, taking some of these regressive policies back. How do we get there?
I wish that I had a good answer for you, Anitra. I really do. I'm going to drop in the chat just for the sake of this, because I think it applies to this question. It's a link to our most recent newsletter that we sent out on Friday, wrapping up the crime special session. I think it's important that we understand this crime special session in the context of all of the other things that the governor is doing so far. So one thing that came up, Kelsey was speaking truth to power about the intent, and Anitra, you spoke to that as well. I think it's not just about actually locking people up, it's about putting people in their place, right? And we know in particular with this group in power who they want to put in their place, right? We've already spoken to that. It's a race issue first and foremost. It's also a class issue, right? What we're seeing is the Landry administration is running a game plan that we have seen for decades in other countries, and more recently in the Southeast United States and in the Plain States, which is when somebody of Landry's ilk gets into power, along with the his sort of corporate puppet masters, they immediately open up the fire hose of destructive policies. They strip public services and sell them off to the most corrupt bidder, and they do it as fast as they possibly can. One example, for instance, would be the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, which holds billions of dollars trying to save our coast. They have shunted that, or about to shunt that, into the Department of Natural Resources and essentially destroy that and CPRA, and probably redistribute those billions of dollars to their own pockets, or to other things that they want to do. We talked about essentially defunding the government. The only public service, quote unquote, that they're putting more money into is police and prisons, also part of that game plan. So that you strip those public services, you do it so fast that people either don't realize it's happening, or by the time they realize it's happening, they feel overwhelmed because it's so much at one time. And then when people really do come to understand what's happened to them, that you've taken away education, healthcare, infrastructure, there's this implicit, very real and implicit threat that if you stand up and try and oppose us, we are going to put you in your place. We have this police and prison system that we can bring down upon you. And that's state police in New Orleans, right? Which they're already doing. They have bills introduced for this upcoming regular session that further criminalize protest and organizing. One would make people who engage in protest, you would be able to charge them under the RICO Act. So if you organize a protest and something happens, there's a fire or somebody gets injured, even if you had nothing to do with it as an organizer, they can charge you under the RICO statutes, under racketeering charges for having organized the protest that led to something. So to understand that this is a game plan, this is not something new, this is not something that Jeff Landry just came up with. It's happening in basically every other southern state, in the Plain states as well. And it's a game plan it's happening in Argentina right now. It's happened in Chile in the past. It's happened in Central America. It's happened in the Balkan states and Eastern Europe. So to understand that what's going on right now, it's a lot. It's happening very quickly. By the time everybody wakes up to it, it might be, it will be very difficult to roll this back. But I think I just really wanted to lay that context out there, because I think it's important that we see this in that broader picture, so that people begin to understand what's happening, so that when we do wake up, or when people recognize what's happened and what's happening, that we understand how the game has been set up, so that when we do start to try to fight to roll this back or change this, maybe people wake up quicker, and in 3.5 years, we vote for somebody different, right? Mm-hmm. Or, hopefully there's federal process, when they cross a line, there's, we don't have to wait maybe 3.5 years. Or whatever it is, but that people wake up to this and recognize that what they've allowed to happen, because ultimately we are the people, we get the government we deserve in certain ways. And there's ultimately, if you want to, getting back to your initial question, it's a very long answer to your initial question, which is, I think that the only way that we change this and roll this back and take a different approach is if people really wake up to what we've done to ourselves, not just in terms of voter turnout, but like general apathy, general, just not engagement. And unfortunately, a lot of harm is going to be caused on that path, right? And, people say, like, I've heard people say, well, everybody said the Trump administration was going to be the worst thing ever, but we survived. Who's we? Because a lot of people didn't survive, right? A lot of people didn't survive. So, we'll survive the next thing. Who's we in your, is it people who are already comfortable? Sure, yeah, you're probably going to survive. But people who aren't, the most marginalized communities, disproportionately will continue down that road. And so I know there's a really long answer, and it wasn't a particularly positive, optimistic answer. But I think it's important that we understand it all in context, and that we understand that people are really going to have to wake up to all of it, right? It's not just the criminal justice, it's the environment. They're going after labor. I said I work with the unions. We've been doing our bill review today and tomorrow. And I mean, there are so many anti-worker bills. It's basically an like the regular session is going to be like the crime session was for working people, though, in terms of going after rights and protections. And so just to understand that it's a part of a larger plan. And people are going to really have to wake up and recognize that the harm that it's causing in order for us to fix it.
All right, absolutely. I think you're on point. Recognizing that it's part of a plan. Recognizing that, I hear a lot of people saying that this was a missed opportunity, and my response has consistently been, for who? It wasn't missed. He's hitting every target he planned on hitting. So I am gonna give, Can we start questions now or?
So, Ms. Brown, I would just like to chime in very briefly on the question that you asked,
Sure.
because as a community of color, we cannot afford to wait for another election. We can't afford to wait till tomorrow, right, to answer some of these things that we're talking about. And what I find, Peter is correct, right? And I feel like, people who do this work, they can talk about it in a way that makes a lot of sense. What I'm finding is that the community that we talk about, they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And too often we sit in circles and talk about these issues, but we're not fully educating the community or really pushing it to them in a way that makes sense for them to even advocate for themselves because of all the underlying issues we've been dealing with for hundreds of years, right? So I
Right.
think it's going to be important for us to address the underlying issues that puts people in these positions to be captured by the captivity of these laws and these things to ensure us that we're not putting ourselves in a position and we are serving the people that we're talking about in a way for them to understand, but also to support them because I feel like this is, even like, I feel it's all about money, right? I know it's all about money, right? Even to the degree about like HB6 around electrocution and the methods of it, but there's a provision in that said you will not know who's the provider, right, of these methods of executing people in the state, right? So that's going to what they were saying to some of these people. They're shifting the money, right? Anytime incarceration is increasing and you're putting it to law enforcement, then you extracting it from the community of their needs to give it to somebody to be more oppressive. So I will
Mm-hmm.
say we have to do a better job in our everyday lives of the individuals we come in contact with and ensure those people that they are educated and they know what's going on and support them in as many ways as we can because it's, it's hard to undo something that is done. In particular, the harm it's going to have on those people who have to go through it, right? Some of us come out of this and make it right and go through some of these, systems and come out, and begin to live their life successfully. But we don't look at the harm that is done for those individuals and their families and their communities when it's happening. So we have to do a better job of restoring and healing people so that we don't have to, buy into the government, trajectory of these prison systems and oppressing people of color.
Mm-hmm. So I hear you saying grassroots, boots on the ground, community, just kind of being entrenched in the community and making sure that we're covering each other and covering ourselves in a way that keeps us safe from what is
Yes,
transpiring.
right. Historically, we have always done that, right? We've been able to take care of each other because if we don't, find a way to support each other through these transition and through what is happening in the government, then we're gonna be left out, and then we're gonna suffer as a whole, right, as a community, based on the laws and the trajectory of what this governor is trying to do.
Got you, got you. Well, I want to thank every last one of the panelists. Pastor Manning or Lane, if you could tell me what's the next move. Do you guys want to move to Q&A a little early?
Absolutely. Let's I'm sorry. Let's move to the Q&A a little bit earlier. I do just want to make this comment too. People are understandably afraid, and when we talk about the cost, it's not only the financial cost; it's the cost of the demise of a community and a culture and a city that's just taking us further down. And I met with some congregation members on Saturday, and people are just, like I said, understandably afraid. And so we've got to increase our awareness of where people are at mentally. This is traumatizing. We've expressed on this call, a lot of, I don't know what to do, and what's the alternative, and we don't know yet, and a lot of understandable hopeless feelings, and as that this, we're only 2 months into this administration. And so we've got to pay very close attention to people and how they're doing, because, everyone can't go to a place of hopelessness, even though, it's hard. And we've got to just realize and accept that it's hard, and get people help where needed, and support each other, and give set up mechanisms to give people the support they need to get through this, and help them understand that they can and that they will, and we've got to be the ones to give them that support. So I just wanted to say that. Let's move to questions, and Sylvia, you're going to take those questions,
Yes.
both that we have accumulated
Pastor.
in the chat, and from other people too, please.
Yes, sir.
Right.
I see a question, because mostly it's a lot of statements that are in the chat, but one question came out for Ernest or anyone. Do you have any approximate figure for how much of the crime statewide and in Orleans is committed by kids under 18?
So my last looking at some of the data, there was about 14% of the kids in New Orleans Parish that was committing the crimes, right? And as of today, and it's over its capacity, and most of them are for violent offenses, we have about 72, 73 kids in the local detention center in comparison to the number of kids we have in the city.
Okay.
And Sylvia, I just want to add on that to that question is that 99% of those kids are African Americans.
Amen.
And then just for some numbers, and this was we were working during the legislative session, so to put some numbers to it, 8% of all cleared crimes in 2022 were committed by juveniles. So it's nothing certainly, but I think not nearly as much as, again, some of the fear mongering that we heard during this legislative session would have had you believe.
Peter, is that statewide or Orleans?
That's statewide.
All right, next question.
This was a statement first. It says, this is in some ways as bad or worse than as Germany in the 1930s. Do we think any legislatures will take up the fight?
Well, I think the in particular in the House, the Democratic caucus actually did a very good job fighting back against this. It was a well-coordinated effort. Representative Matt Willard, who represents the mostly Gentilly, is the House Democratic Caucus chairman. He, back at the beginning of this year, reached out to a few of us in the advocacy community and really created an open channel. And so we were able to provide them with talking points and questions and amendments. And he really did a great job coordinating with the Democratic caucus to get that stuff on the record. So while it's certainly not, just because of the numbers, they just don't have the votes to stop it. I do think to that point, they at least they took up the fight. And that's sometimes, especially when the numbers aren't with you, the best you can do is put up a good fight, right? Not just let yourself get rolled over. And I think they did a very good job of that.
Okay. The next question. Let's see, I'm trying to get it because this thing just
Sylvia, can we and maybe either one of maybe Mr. Ernest or Kelsey wants to jump into any legislators that they've also seen that have kind of stood out in terms of their opposition and raising their voice.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelsey.
Go ahead. I have to look up the legislator's last name.
No, I'm just gonna echo what Peter said, right? Because even in the opening, Matt, he was in opposition and kind of stole the train a little bit on every bill that was introduced. So I just want to echo and say what he said is definitely correct.
Okay, Kelsey?
Edmund Jordan is out of Baton Rouge. He did a really good job, I think, fighting back against some of that stuff. On the Senate side, Royce Duplessis did a good job. Mandy Landry brought some excellent questions and challenges. Jay Luno, who's a senator out of north central Louisiana, on the Senate side, he did a very good job. So I think there are some. I'm trying to filibuster a little bit until Kelsey finds the last name of who she's looking for. But there was definitely some good fight put up.
And I just noticed on my end, Amy Freeman from New Orleans did some pretty compelling testimony, and her advocacy online, trying to get awareness and get constituents to reach out to their respective legislators, was impressive to me.
Amen.
And to that point too, I would say, I would ask Peter and Ernest, Kelsey, how did y'all see the people show up? Those who are, from grassroots organizations, did you see us come out to be able to advocate and use our voices?
Well, Ernest did a great job bringing people. I mean, Ubuntu showed up strong, I think, and really, had a presence. So I think a lot of credit on that goes to Ernest. I think there was some Vote did a really good job turning their people out. Step Up Louisiana did a pretty good job turning people out. But I actually thought, I don't know, the ones that stood out to me, I mean, I thought Ubuntu was maybe the most visible, along with Vote.
Amen.
Very good.
Yeah, and that's part of it's part of the structure of this system that we deal with, right? These things happen, start at 9 o'clock in the morning, right? In Baton Rouge, and people who have everyday lives are not able to do it. But again, I think it goes to us being a little bit more strategic on how we can get, folks, engaged in a way, or just informed, because it's like the playbook was set and, they didn't have the votes, right? Regardless of how much we push, they just didn't have the votes to do it. But I think on the other end, knowing that we can educate the community for upcoming things, and, we're going to be faced with some elections here in the city pretty soon. So we need to get ready way before that time comes.
Amen. Amen. Anyone else want to answer or reply to that?
There is someone on the call by the name of Sierra who's had a hand up for the whole time.
Sierra?
Yes. Uhuru.
Okay.
Hey, everybody.
Oh, that's Mr. Dennis.
Good
I'm
to see
sorry,
you.
Mr. Dennis. I didn't see your hand on my
I'm
screen.
glad to see that you're doing better.
Thank you, sir.
Anitra, you're doing great moderating on this call, a noteworthy call. Peter Robbins representing the policies. Here's what has been noted. First of all, I think that the way we go about doing what we need to do to protect ourselves has to be reversed. Legislation, policies create the factor of capitalism. It keeps the money flow in the colonial mode of production. I say the government, at our expense. Guns don't come into the community legally. You have police officers who have gun shops. You have other factors that have gun shops. And by the way, Ernest, I love you, comrade. And they're placed in our community for us to do what? Self-destruction. These are realities. And there's never been any piece of legislation, never, that purposefully, by real intent, to come in to form a cure for the issues. What they've done, they kept the perpetuation ongoing. This has been going on forever. I think that our approach has to be different. I think that if I have an object I know nothing about in my hand, I don't have, number one, any respect for that. So I get emotional and I use it on who? Us. It's by design. Here's the factor. Landry will never propose a policy that will make us safe because the intent is to genocide all of us. These are realities. And so if we sit back and we think that we're involved in something such as a CRB or civilian investigative panel to observe police actions and then hold them accountable, we'll never hold them accountable. First of all, we don't have agency. We don't control anything. Everything's done in the mice's maze is for us to keep going back to the vicious cycle. Our people are dying on a daily basis. And those that we criminalize are really the victims. The real criminal is the legislature. The real criminal are the ones that piece these gain by intent pieces of legislation under the guise of protecting the community. They never have protected the community. We have no agency. What I mean by that, we have to take these matters in our own hands. We cannot rely on government input or involvement that will save us, because there's no intention to save us.
Save us, amen.
There is no intention to save us. And Peter, you got to admit this as well, being the strategist that you are, an analyzer, that you've seen this gerbil's wheel where it seems like, okay, well, we must change our direction and reword something, and it's a trick in the word to make people again believe that they're going to be safe. This policy will work. Work it together. Why, hell, young people aren't listening because it's nothing that's being proposed that will make them want to change. By design, we have to take our own initiative as people to take the responsibility to save ourselves. Nobody's going to save us. We are our own liberators. There's nobody that is on the colonial mode of production that sees this as all nothing but capital and a capital gain for a corporate colonial mode of production. The government and the ones that manufacture these guns and put them in my neighborhood for me to go and pick up, that if we don't take the responsibility and we keep relying on the same people to bring the cure, we'll be destined to the same problem if we live another 100 years.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis. We have several more messages. I would like to come back to you, but I want to give everyone
thank
the
you very much.
opportunity.
My input
Thank
was
you.
brief.
Thank you. Miss Belinda, you had your hand up for a while, and then I get to the questions in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Sylvia. And also thanks to all of the presenters doing a great job with the educational information. But Pastor Manning lodged a question, and that, you know, what did the public look like in regards to our governor calling a special session. He could not wait for the regular session. He called a special session. So there was, like Mr. Dennis just said, by design to expedite their plan. And now we're behind the 8 ball because, you know, I think someone said it earlier, you know, what is it that we should be doing? And this is my question to Anita or Ernest or Peter. What is it that we should be doing right now to reverse these outrageous acts against us? I do know, I don't know if I'm correct or not, how many votes do it take to recall a governor? Is it 1 million?
Yeah, Sister Belinda, let me just add to that too, if you would just give me the opportunity to, because I what you talked about was the difference between the special session and the regular session. And when you talk about, you know, reversing this or you know, curtailing what's already been done, what I've heard is that there may be an opportunity to roll back some things in the regular session. So I want to kind of couple that, marry that to your question right there, your comment, to say, you know, is that the opportunity if we mobilize, if we do the work right now, can we get some of these things rolled back? And I would like our panelists to respond to that, and if that if you agree, that goes along with your question, Belinda.
Correct, Pastor. You're absolutely right. Thank you.
You know, these are always tough questions because we want to fight back and we want to be able to change things quickly. And I don't like being a downer, you know, but I also think it's important that we are grounded in reality when it comes to policy and politics. Because I don't want people to go down when we could be using, we only have so many resources, including our time and our energy, right? Not just talking about money, right? We only have so many resources. And so it's important that we use them in ways that will have the greatest impact. I will tell you that absent some sort of just scandal beyond scandal that we've ever heard, a recall petition and election is just not a realistic path. When it comes to trying to roll back some of these measures during this coming regular session, I just don't, given how strong, like the governor brought, like, strong-armed these Republican legislators like I've never seen before. I had conversations with several Republicans who were in office during the JRI reforms, which were largely rolled back, and other reforms that were largely rolled back. People who had admitted to me that they had deep reservations about what was being done, who had deep reservations about undoing work that they had played a role in passing in their time in office. And but they told me they could not break with the Republican Party and with the governor on this, that the word came down that if they broke more than maybe one vote here and there, that all of their future appropriations would be at risk. The governor had at least three of his staffers in every committee hearing to make sure that everybody understood that they were not allowed to break from the line on this. And so I just don't see that changing over the course of 2 weeks to the point where we go into this regular session and all of a sudden some of those folks are ready to stand up and go against what they had been strong-armed into just a couple weeks ago. Now, when we're talking about policies, you know, nothing is set in stone necessarily. There's the future, there are other things. I just think that right now, when we're talking about those specific questions, a recall or rolling some of this back in the regular session, that's not where I would suggest people put their energy. But I think that we do have an opportunity to speak to what Ernest was saying, to speak to what others have said, to use as an opportunity to hopefully to educate the folks that we talk to in our community, to help them understand what's happening and what has already happened and what could get worse and how things are moving, and then and to hopefully use that as a way of increasing engagement so that we can keep some of this stuff from continuing to happen, and that when the time does come, because it will come, when we can roll this back, when we can reverse this tide, that we are as best positioned as possible to do that. And that's going to require changing shifting the ground, changing the narrative, changing the way people understand. You know, it's policy is, and I think Ernest and I think others have said this, is that, you know, policy is largely the outcome of other conditions, right? It's not so much the policies themselves. Those are the ultimate manifestation of the conditions on the ground, the conditions in society, the way people are engaging with the world around them. We need to change those conditions so that when we get to that ultimate outcome, those actual policies, that we are either rolling back what's happened or we are bringing things and moving things in a different direction. So I think where our energies are best spent right now, when we talk about getting those policy outcomes, whether it's rolling back or moving forward in a different direction, is we need to change. And I think other speakers have gotten to this in a more direct way, which is just, we need to change the conditions on the ground. And that's, I think, how we get to stopping some of this. But I don't know that there's this immediate chance to you know, recall or roll back things that we've seen here in the past few months.
All right, Sylvia.
Ernest, I was wondering if Ernest wanted to say anything.
No, I think that's in all
That's
honesty, I think
basic.
that's part of our problem too. Sometimes we're in conversations and we get the medicine we need, but then we want more medicine and then we go look in other places. I think Peter hit it on the nail, right? Is that, we got to prepare ourselves and, for when the opportunities present ourselves, but we got to take advantage of what we do every day, right? It's like taking care of ourselves, educating our community, right? And I seen there was a question in the chat about, do we have the ability to expand this education component, right? Because if it was left up to us in New Orleans, we can win, right? But when we talk about going just across the river to Jefferson Parish and some of these outlying rural areas, they're not getting that type of support or education like we get it, right? So how do we educate the entire state? Because most of his attack was specifically at New Orleans, right? Because he wanted the capital from New Orleans. He wanted to oppress the young kids and particular Black kids in New Orleans who have made some bad decisions, right? But you can't punish all our kids because all our kids are not out there making those type of decisions. But we need to get farther up in the state in some of these rural areas and start educating them more to get them support to talk to their legislators, right, to shift the narrative around what's happening in our society.
Amen. Kelsey, you wanted to say anything else before we move on to the next question?
Somebody asked what we can do in the meantime, while we're waiting to see the effects that these bills have. And I think the most important thing that we're capable of doing is really going into our communities and investing in them with our own time and energy, which I know is asking a lot of people in these days because we're all so busy. But if we know that, food scarcity and lack of education contribute to, school dropouts and crime, then we can take it upon ourselves to the extent possible to contribute to food pantries in the neighborhood, to help tutor students that don't have access to parents that can help them with homework. Just small actions like that, even if it only targets 3 or 4 kids at a time, can keep those specific kids out of the system and do what the legislators are refusing to do by targeting the crime causing issues on the front end. And that's all I've got for now.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question, it was asked, in the judicial code, are the lawyers and judges obligated to have their oath of office and criminal code as well? Ernest?
Yeah, I mean, Dennis kind of just hit it on the nail. We don't like to talk about it enough, but when we're talking about the structural systemic systems, you're gonna get that, right? And we understand we live in a society that is part of our structure, but we continue to ask a structural systemic system to do something for us, that's not gonna happen, right? Its history has repeated itself repeatedly, right? We engage with it in a way because it's necessary. But if we truly want to be, a society, and this is why we name our organization Ubuntu, right? Is because we understand the structural systemic system and what we have to do to, in our society or from an overall arcing point. But on the ground, our care is for each other and how we take care of each other and what we build in our communities, because we have seen this over and over and over again. And I always say, something's wrong with us. We working on a violence prevention program right now, right? And it's a health crisis, but they don't treat it like it's a health crisis, right? Because it's Black and brown kids who getting killed for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So when we look at these systems and we understand what's going on, even though we're engaging, our gratitude comes from when I can help you or an individual how to read, pay a bill, do something that's going to put them out that moment. Because we're in these moments now that, if you don't support somebody, you may be saying tomorrow, I never knew they was going through that, or there's something
Mhm.
triggered them to do something violent. So we have to be more supportive, hand in hand, and understand the systems that we're dealing with and deal with them accordingly.
Amen. Thank you, Ernest. Mr. Peter, you want to, you want to speak on that? You or Kelsey, before we move on?
I think Ernest covered it pretty well.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question is, what efforts are being made to get this information to the non-NOLA parts of the state?
I'll jump in on that one. So
Okay.
as I mentioned, I work with the Louisiana AFL-CIO, and that's union member. It's over 100,000 union members across the state. Another couple 100,000 people when you include households. I think it's something that I've done on and off for the years, but it's certainly ramped up over the past year or so, and is now a significant portion of the work we do at Louisiana Progress. And well, obviously we're focused on labor issues. A lot of what we're trying to do is a lot more education in general with the membership. And obviously a lot of those members are, the Greater New Orleans area is the largest region for union membership. We're talking about a lot of members in other parts of the state. And we're really trying to educate them about a lot of different issues. Again, focused on labor, number one, but even some of this stuff. And these are folks all over the state. Many of them vote Republican. Many of them are Republican, but they have, by dint of being a union member in many cases, they have been exposed to some different ideas. They do have a little bit more of a, non sort of Trumpy or whatever Republican economic analysis. And so they are open to understanding some of this. And so that's something that we're really trying to do through the unions is broaden that education and educate people who are outside of the New Orleans area. I'm not going to pretend it's something it's not going to happen here, to the point where we're going to roll back laws in the next couple months. It's going to be a long-term effort. But that's what we're trying to overcome, involves what's going to have to be a long-term effort. And when we talk about those other places in the state, particularly the sort of outer suburban and rural areas, a lot of what they, if you spend time in those places, and I've spent a lot of time in those places, you go to those, you drive through those towns and those rural areas, everybody's got a satellite dish. And everybody lives a long drive away from the grocery store or their work or their church or wherever they're going. And what do? They get up in the morning, they turn on cable television, and they've got Fox News on, they've got Newsmax, whatever they're watching. They get in the car to drive to one of those places, and it's a long drive, and they're listening to that radio, that often, some of those, those conservative radio stations. And so they're getting brainwashed over and over again every day. And then they're spending time when they are with other people, with other like-minded people. And so there's an element of this that no matter how great we are at organizing and educating those folks is out of our control. And I don't say that to be defeatist. I just think, again, we need to understand that. And so then it's also, how do we provide a different narrative? It can't just be, you all are voting against your best interest, or what's wrong with you, or you're wrong. We have to tell them a different story that they can, that resonates with them, and that can vie for brain space with all of that programming and propaganda and brainwashing that they're getting from these national and international outlets. And that's a complex issue. But I think it's important that for those who do get an opportunity to work in those types of communities, to talk to those kind of people, you can't argue with them. You can't tell them they're wrong. You're attacking their identity, not just their opinions, but their identity. And so the thing is to try to have an open discussion with them, listen to what they're saying and where they're coming from, and then try to find the places where you can maybe talk to them about the ways that their lives are impacted, and tell a different story. It's got to be about storytelling. That's an important aspect of this.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Peter. Do anyone else want to comment before we move on?
I just want to say I've seen Brooke with her hand up for a few minutes. I know we're running short on time. I didn't want her to get skipped.
Yes. Okay, Ms. Brooke.
I love Peter's thought, and my thought was something somewhat similar, but I mean, what if we had like a troupe of actors who went throughout the state, putting on shows about how much money this stuff was going to cost everybody, what it was going to do, and how our reforms actually did work. But I mean, it's got to be something sort of fun and, as you say, not confrontive to their own values. And I think also we need to, as a group, we need to sit down and just make up talking points. We need to have a plan and have talking points that are really valid and show how we think, or how between the coast being demolished, all the work that we've done on the coast, and all the efforts we've made as far as criminals and emptying jails, it cannot just go to waste. And obviously in New Orleans, we have a liberal cast here, and it's fine. We cannot we can't deny that we should have had a lot more people out to vote. We could have actually stopped Landry probably, but we didn't. So that's it, I guess. I don't really have more, except if people have good ideas on what we can do, as well as the storytelling.
I think one thing, Brooke, to note is that, yes, voter turnout was very low, but if 100% of the registered voters in Louisiana turned out to vote, Jeff Landry still would have become governor. This is the state we live in. I think we need to be real about this stuff if we want to change ultimately change it. There is, I suppose, a possible world where all of our people turned out and a lot of their people didn't, where somehow maybe possibly Landry could have lost. But I mean, there's also a possibility that somebody walks up to me today and hands me a winning lottery ticket. There's always like a non-zero chance. But I don't mean that to knock the idea of, how do we get there, Brooke, and I think Brooke might have dropped off, so I don't know if I'm, but oh no, I see you, Brooke. I'm sorry, I see you. There you go. I just, yeah.
I do think that a change in the balance might have made a difference in the way Landry acted out his.
Yeah, I mean, he's an authoritarian at heart. So I mean, and the people that he's working for, knew what they were getting when they spent a lot of money on him and the legislators who got elected. So I mean, I don't want us to, I just think, like I said, it's important that we're real about it, because we do want to change this ultimately. I do believe we can change it ultimately, but we can't, do that unless we acknowledge, where we are, and that's and that it's going to take a lot of work.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's Sylvia. It's now 6:25.
Yeah, that's what I was about to just say. Questions that were not asked, we will look over them and get them asked and answered. And we will get back with you all. But at this time, Pastor Manning, I know you was going to ask every panelist to
Sylvia, Miss Lane had her hand up for quite some time.
Well, wait. Yeah, we are short of time, and that's what I just have spoken, that we will get these questions answered, but for the lack of time, we have to move on, because we are running behind.
I just want to point out to people that some documents have been put into the chat, and I want to ask that will help them with talking points and help them see what are the high standing nails that we want to hit. So please remember to save your chat, and then you can download. Those links will be there so you can download. That's all I have time.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lane.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Lane.
Thank you, Pastor Manning. Go ahead. I turn it over to you.
Absolutely. So thank you. This is an ongoing conversation. This is an issue that Justice and Beyond will continue to come back to, and this is an opportunity. Agitators, if you will, like Governor Landry, coming to our place and time in order not to, create hopelessness within us, but to give us an opportunity to galvanize and to come together. This should create within us what we call, in my faith, a righteous indignation and anger, and then calls people to get up and to get out and to get involved and to get engaged. So let's not look at this as an opportunity, as a time in which we get discouraged and feel like our backs are against the wall, but look at it as an opportunity where we can bring people in and mobilize and say, okay, join Ubuntu Village, join every other organization, join Vote, these organizations that are doing great work. Step Up Louisiana. Let's multiply these numbers of people who are getting engaged exponentially, because now was the time where we're gonna just harness that passion and say now is the time where we can really do something and get ready for the future moments that are ahead. So I just want to leave us with that thought. So again, I want to thank Kelsey and Peter and Ernest, and especially Anitra, you as well. So grateful for you for moderating this conversation, for all of you for attending tonight, and for being passionate about this issue. And for those who are going to be listening via Facebook, let's use this opportunity to just create a moment in time where we realize that the power is in the people and that we can do this. So don't become discouraged, become more courageous in our work. So as we conclude tonight, listen, we always want to give people who are maybe running for office an opportunity to talk. There is an election in March. And so if there's anybody on this line and on the call tonight that is running, please make your voice known. If you're a candidate and you wanted to say a few words, take this opportunity. Are there any candidates on the line tonight?
I am.
All right.
My video and reaction button isn't working, but I'm running for OPTEC in District A, which is the local party to do a lot of what has been discussed in terms of meeting with people and getting them motivated to obviously to vote, but also to get in touch with and support our legislators who are putting forth progressive efforts and resistance against these incredible bills that are being forced down our throats.
All right. Tell us your name so everybody knows.
Marianne Machat.
All right. Very good.
District A.
All right. Thank you, Marianne. Any other candidates on the line?
No, but I'm going to speak for you. This is Betty DeMarco. Pastor Manning is also running for Orleans Parish Democratic Executive Committee. What district are you in?
District B.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Betty, for saying that. I could not say that myself for obvious reasons, so thank you.
I could say it for you.
Thank you so much. Any other candidates? Fine.
Yeah, this is Liz Sojak. I'm not a candidate, but I just want to announce tonight that next Monday, Justice and Beyond will be in person with as many of those Democratic candidates that will show up in person at Broadmoor Community Church from 5 to 7. Meet the Dem candidates. What are we voting for is the title. And it's going to be an informal forum. And everyone is invited, and all the candidates, even if they haven't heard personally from me yet, they should have gotten an email or a text message by now. They're all invited from 5 to 7 at Broadmoor Community Church next Monday. And then this Thursday as well, I just wanted to invite everybody. 350 New Orleans is having an in-person meeting about what's going on in the legislature this year, primarily related to environmental and climate, but probably other things will be discussed as well. That is 6:30 at Broadmoor Community Church this Thursday night. Thanks so much.
And if
Excuse
you weren't already tired of hearing me, I will actually be one of the panelists at that one as well. So for those who are like, I really need another hour and a half of Peter, I'll see you on Thursday.
Yes.
I was just asking,
we all do, Peter. We all do.
I don't know about that.
Go ahead, Sylvia.
will there be refreshments? You did not mention that.
Yes, there will be refreshments at both events. Yes.
Thank you.
I have something. I thought we was giving everybody an opportunity to announce. There's also an application online if you are a Democrat and you do wish to become a delegate for the Democratic Convention this year that's going to be held in Chicago. So I also put my information in the chat for people that can help us spread the word to join Louisiana United International. I put all my information in my website there.
All right. Thank you, Belinda. Any other announcements as we prepare to close this meeting?
Pastor Manning?
Yes.
I just want to mention that we are putting together a monthly feature because we all understand that getting out the vote is one of the single most important things that we can do in Orleans Parish. And Justice and Beyond is going to be working with several other groups, including Liz's group that she just mentioned, environmental voters. I always forget the last part of it, Liz, I'm sorry.
Project.
We're going to be hosting Getting Out the Vote, and we'll be sending out information on that. You'll hear it next week, and you'll get a bulletin about it. But it's something we want to do in terms of calls that we can make, letters we can write, and postcards we can send. Primarily starting with people in Orleans Parish.
All right.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Lane. Any other announcements? All right, everybody.
Yes, Reverend Manning, I have an announcement. This is Jody Manali. The Gillespie Center Memorial Community Breakfast is hosting a legislative roundtable this Saturday from 10:30 to noon. And we don't have any panelists, no keynote speakers, but anyone who's running for office is welcome to drop by. We're going to be looking at the upcoming election, and we're going to be looking at the upcoming legislative session. So,
very good.
And we're at First Unitarian Universalist Church of New Orleans at 5212 South Claiborne Avenue.
Thank you, Jody. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Any announcements?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody to keep up with the New Orleans Tribune at www.theneworleanstribune.com. That's it.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Anitra.
Anybody else? All right, everybody.
Big thank you to Anitra. Big thank you to Anitra.
Anitra, put that in the chat, Anitra.
Yes, big thank you.